good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 16, 2020 edition of the 2020 Blue Ribbon Task Force Committee. This is officially our third meeting that we've had. Started out the first 2 weeks or the last 2 weeks of May, and then we've actually been in the last 2 weeks doing some school visits, and now we've kind of promised that we would come back and sort of gather as a committee and just really kind of compare notes. And so we've prepared the agenda that's listed on your screen right now. We do have one more video that we will be able to show you, which was available in our second meeting, but when we did the steel and let me see here, the roads videos, but we ran out of time. So at this point, let me just sort of get a shout out to my co-chair, Victoria Moreno Herrera. We have, between the two of us, we've tackled all the school visits. We've done 14 of these so far. For those of you that are keeping track, out of the 43, we've seen 2 videos. I've already mentioned steel and roads, and we'll have one more tonight. So if you include the school videos, we will have seen by tonight a total of 17 of the 43, which is pretty incredible if you think that today we're just sort of in the middle of June, and our timeline was to try and be done by the middle of July so we could gather together and come up with our report. So let me, that's where we're at right now. Victoria, I don't know if you wanted to jump in and make a couple of comments before we actually put on the MLK video, and then we can come back. We've had quite a number of you all join us on these school tours. I will tell you that we have covered all the districts. All 7 districts have now been covered. We've had, just because of the way the survey came about, we've actually had more. I think we've covered 3 schools in District 7. All the other districts have been 2 schools. And I think right now we've only got 1 school that we've seen in District 1. But we've covered all the districts, and we've tried following the school surveys that you all answered. So Victoria, let me kind of turn it over to you, and then Ryan will get to the MLK video, and then we'll come back and let's start talking about whether it's the videos that you all have been seeing or those of you that have been able to join us in person. We want to get your feedback. Victoria?
Thanks, I won't take too much longer. I echo everything Mario just said, and also want to thank everybody. I think almost everyone who's on this call tonight has been to at least one of the schools that we have videos for so far. So I think that that's great, a testament to the active members that we have on this task force. And I'm excited to see this next one with you guys. I've watched all of them because they are up on the Blue Ribbon website. So I've had the chance to watch them all. I held off. I'm excited to see this one with you guys today. But with that, I said, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, Ryan.
Can y'all see that?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, here we go.
So this is Martin Luther King School. It was built in 1957, the main portion of the campus. It's another example of mid-century construction with the ribbon windows, continuous ribbon windows and eyebrows. One area we want to concentrate on here is not just the conditions of this 65, almost 65-year-old facility, but also the structural impact that occurred after the drainage around the campus was improved. This campus experienced structural movement, difficult to rectify without either complete replacement or some major construction work. It's obviously a very aged facility, and it would need major improvements more suitable for the name that it carries, Martin Luther King. The original construction of this building was for a middle school, and was later used as an elementary school, and now it's an academy, kinder through the 8th grade. It received limited improvements. They definitely been taking good care of it. It's well-maintained facility. However, that's simply cosmetic, and it's time to do some major work. The cafeteria and kitchen are part of the original facility from the 50s. The low ceiling level is an example of that. We've had several accessibility complaints we've partially addressed, but not in full scale. The kitchen is much smaller also than our standard. Its air conditioning system is also from the Cool Schools program that was put in the late 80s. It doesn't provide the appropriate outside air circulation. The auditorium was built as part of the original construction as a middle school. It received significant renovations for at least the seating and the flooring. And the stage it has is very unique stage with several levels, and its accessibility was very challenging. So there was a project where a lift was put in to stop at different levels to address that accessibility. It's somewhat unusual to have a stage with so many levels, so that would be an area to be rectified as part of a major renovation. Also, the acoustics is not fully appropriate, and also while the ceiling is higher on one end, it's kind of low on the other end. It does not change heights as you move with the auditorium. Also, the slopes do not meet the accessibility requirements, so a lot of issues that would need to be addressed. One area we have not talked about is the sprinkler system. This facility does not have a sprinkler system, which is currently a requirement for fire code. So as we walk down the long hallway of the main building of Martin Luther King, you would feel like you're almost going down, because the ground level has shifted over the years. And while it looks well maintained and beautiful, but you'll see visible cracks that's been repaired over time. And also you would see that the hallways are not rated for escape routes in case of a fire. So you would see the jealousy windows on both sides of the classrooms of the hallway, and that if there is a fire in one area, it can travel into the hallway very quickly and prevents the escape route. Those hallways must be rated, should not be easily connected to the spaces, the occupied spaces like the classrooms. This is a sample of hidden expansion joints or covering major cracks that occurred due to movements of the grounds. It just put sheet metal to put a cover to severe cracks. This is an example of a classroom in the main wing. The windows are original. The shades are most likely original. The ceiling, the glued ceiling, the conduits running all over to install systems that were put in at later time.
With the floor to ceiling height being limited, as you see with the surface mounted lights, that's literally the slab of the roof structure above. And so the decision came in, and so the decision points were, okay, do we bring the ceiling down to a level of almost 6 feet so that you have the proper space for the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the lighting, or is the better use of the or best value for the district is just to replace the building altogether?
Also, it's very obvious that this is almost about 600 to 650 square foot classroom, and you can imagine trying to put 22 students or even 25 students in a space like this, how congested space that would be to educate our kids. We are here at the locker facilities, another example of a very dated facilities as far as their conditions, their storage space, their lockers, and their showers, as well as their infrastructure where it comes to the air conditioning, the lighting, also the restroom use. They're all in inappropriate conditions and as far as inadequate space and distribution. At Martin Luther King, the two gyms are side by side, which really good design. However, they don't have the, first of all, the floors are tiled floors. They're not the appropriate wood flooring that flexes and prevents injuries. Also, we don't have the appropriate ceiling height of a gym. And on top of that, some of the height was taken by adding air conditioning ducts that obviously is subject to be hit frequently.
Even in the competition gym, some of the side practice ramps actually protrude over the inbounds line for the competition surface. One of the additional common themes as we walk throughout the spaces, if you probably heard this ambient noise, seemingly in every single occupied space, there's a level of ambient noise that persists, be that from the mechanical system or electrical system, predominantly from the mechanical system. And so just imagine day in, day out, whether you're in the classroom trying to study and trying to concentrate, or in physical education to support physical health, that ambient sound is always omnipresent.
One important point to highlight in the difference in construction between old construction, mid-century 1957, and newer version, there's probably close to 10 feet height difference between the two-story of the new addition versus the two-story of the older building. That highlights the difference that's needed in the original building, so that may dictate the need to actually replace that facility, since you don't have the space from floor to floor to provide the air conditioning and the utilities needed and keep them invisible. So what we've seen at Martin Luther King, there are several issues to deal with, primarily the structural problem with this facility, but also the conditions of a almost 65-year-old facility. All the finishes need to be updated, all the infrastructure need to be upgraded. And also we saw examples of small classrooms and also the supporting areas, whether it's in the gym area or the auditorium. There's a lot of improvements will be needed.
There's been just ample examples and proof of catastrophic structural failure, likely. One of the major takeaways from the gyms is the fact they're using the BCT for the floor that's just, glued right down to the concrete slab, which gives no give as a child or a student is running against that floor. So that's potentially, health issues that we certainly want to address as well.
Okay, folks. Thanks to Kamal, Kedrick, and I'm not sure who shot the video. I don't know if that was you, Ryan, or one of the members on your team, but thanks to everyone, because again, Victoria talked about how she's seen the videos. I've seen a lot of them. I need to basically go and finish up a couple more, but they give you a really good sense for those of you that haven't been able to join us for any number of reasons of the condition of these schools. And I would just really kind of sort of sum them up. And I'm going to turn it over to the floor for anyone to sort of jump in and give us your own individual thoughts. I've seen schools. ALA Euclid is the oldest school I've seen, built in the 1880s. I think MLK now is probably the newest school, built in 1957. And you have the rest of them sort of built somewhere in between, either the turn of the century, either after World War I, after World War II, and into the 50s. And there's probably been some that were built in the 60s that I've not been on those tours. But at the end of the day, what we've seen is the same thing, is because the last major bond to touch all of these schools was in 1997. Most of these infrastructures are, more than 30 years old, and they're not in great condition. We had an opportunity in 2005 as a district and as a community come together and pass a bond that did not succeed. And so from 1997, the next major bond was in 2010. And again, for those of you all that were with me in the 2010 bond, that touched 22 projects, including some of the high schools, but it wasn't to the level that I think our superintendent, Mr. Burrows and Mr. Wright and Mr. Alhaber and others in leadership and our board are envisioning through this bond. So we've seen a lot of problems. I've done my share of talking. So let me kind of open it up to the floor. For those of you either that have seen the videos or went in person, what are your thoughts?
Hold on.
This is Gina Amatangelo. I'll just say that based on what I'd seen prior to joining this committee as a volunteer and a parent on campuses, and then through the tours that I've attended and the videos I've seen, it's clear to me that we have aging infrastructure and we really need to invest in upgrades to the schools for the learning environment, but also for health and safety reasons. And I think it will be, I'm interested to hear what other committee members have to say, but I'm interested in a conversation about the challenges of passing the bond at this time. I'm convinced that we need it, and just look forward to hearing what others have to say.
So I'll kick off with that statement. It is obvious that our schools need an investment for our learning environment and safety environment. The question that I have for us as a group is in our kickoff. Some of the priorities that we had earmarked included pretty expensive things like AstroTurf, and I didn't see enough of I didn't see enough equity in the proposed priorities. And what I appreciate about having access to the videos and in such a short time period, and even having new folks in this group, is being able to see the state of our classrooms from an equity lens. And you know me, I'm always going to advocate for our special education population. Because from a numbers perspective, our SPED population is on par with our honor roll, our honor student population. But when we see that SAISD prides itself in, I'd love to see SAISD pride itself in being a safe space to land in for our special education children, regardless on what their spectrum of need and mobility is. And when we look at the state of some of the bathrooms for these classrooms, or the state of like what the classrooms look like for even our children in our behavioral units, it's the inequity is quite obvious, and it's quite sad, and it almost feels intentional, because at this point, here's a voice that's looking out for special education, and I didn't see us close the gap enough in our prior bond, and so I hope we're not repeating that trend with this very audacious bond.
Can I add something? I mean, and I've also talked to Denise about this. We know each other, and and just my own experiences touring. The only schools I toured in person so far are Longfellow and then Lamar, which I'd been to several times before. But Longfellow, one of the things to touch on Denise's point on special ed, they have a room which I guess houses a behavioral unit that brings in students from several middle schools. That's the way I understand, like the ones that have the highest needs and for behavioral issues. And I just, one of the things that struck me was that room was probably in the worst condition of all of the rooms that I saw. And it was like off, and it actually made me cry. I was like, what does it say to those students that the place that they go every day, where they spend their whole day, is like tucked away in this really, I mean, it was really shocking to me, you know, and I think we need to just think about that from a, you know, bigger picture. What do we say, especially if we're saying, okay, all of the kids that have these highest needs are going to go to this campus. I know that there's also units for, and I'm not as familiar as Denise, but, you know, people with severe physical limitations. But my understanding is that at Longfellow, these were for the behavioral units. And I really think that we need to think about, especially if we're bringing in students from all over the district to one space, that it is a beautiful space that says you are worthy, you are important to us as humans. It was shocking, and I'm emotional about it. Everything else that I've seen is not a big surprise. I mean, yeah, one school, it's like, yep, same HVAC. Okay, yes, we have a leak in the ceiling, but we need to think about how we tell students that they're valued, that they're teachers, that they're valued. Because, you know, Longfellow has some of the most beautiful, beautiful new facilities of cafeteria and fine arts, but yet that self-contained room was shocking to me. So sorry to get emotional, but I can't help it.
No, thank you. Thank you for bringing your emotion and your vulnerability. I often feel like a lone wolf when I'm talking about that. And I'm sure, you know, and it feels like that conversation doesn't land, but when your child has needs and you care, and even if you don't care, I feel like SAISD has a responsibility to treat each child that is enrolled in any of its programs as humanely and as compassionately as possible. And unfortunately, that's the state of a lot of the classrooms and the spaces where we educate our most vulnerable kids. I mean, I'm so glad you're bringing this emotion into this space, because I mean, if we're going to be raising, and we're going to put our heart and effort to raise $1.5 billion, at a minimum, these spaces deserve to be, at a minimum, I want to inspire SAISD to do something world class and innovative in this space, because we have the capacity to do it, but we just, you know, we're earmarking monies for AstroTurf. It doesn't make sense to me.
I would like to say something also as the parent of a special needs student. I know I spoke to Rosie Cruz about it, and that is Bowie Elementary, which houses the adult vocational program that my son will hopefully attend this coming year. It was not on the list, and so we were wondering, where is Bowie Elementary in terms of the adult year vocational program? Is it anywhere to be visited? Is there anything going into bringing up that property, that school?
So Rosalinda, let me answer that question.
Yes.
So those buildings are going to be, that's one of the central office buildings, because the special ed team is there.
Yes.
And so when everybody moves to the new central office, all of those buildings are going to be looked at, and they are part of the overall portfolio in terms of what we haven't decided is what they will become. So will they be full-fledged schools next year? But in our $2.5 billion total need, we're counting doing some renovations to those buildings. We just don't know what they will be.
Okay.
Because some of them could become traditional schools again. So for example, there's Burnett that could be used to relieve overcrowding at Bano, as an example. And so we also have Bowie, we have Cooper's, we have several buildings that will be freed up that could become schools to help overcrowding in other areas or for special programming.
Okay, thank you.
Other people have comments?
Yeah. Thank you all for your comments, and thank you all. I know we had some great conversations on site the past couple of weeks. I think I toured maybe 4 or 5. And I have my own personal list on where I have those 5 that I've seen, but I know going into the next tour schedule, I really think if there's if Mario and Victoria feel, I know there's a criteria that the Blue Ribbon Task Force is going to look at in terms of where we're at But I think while we're still fresh on the mind, maybe we can do like a midway point assessment. So we're not forgetting. So we have those charted in the chart, and we have, we have the deliverables of that. So we don't forget about what we've seen and some of the key points before we go into the next phase. Just because I feel we may get lost in some, I wasn't part of the last Blue Ribbon Task Force, but I just don't know if there's a way that, that can happen. So we don't lose sight of the things we've seen, but we can kind of keep it all on par with the next touring sites.
But after we eat, I can take the daughter food since she and Mario haven't eaten.
Good point. Others?
Nor the girls. You know that?
Okay.
I'll wait till you're done.
Pat, Albert, Maria, anyone want to talk about your experiences?
So my experience is always wanting to do for the one that hasn't been touched. I mean, that's my priority. When I look at I don't even know which one we attended, that it was just pathetic that we haven't touched it in 50 years. And then like this one, this MLK, just, I didn't tour that, but just watching this video, those lockers, I mean, no, I mean, that's my priority. If this is what we're talking about, I know Gina mentioned something about the viability of this. I thought we'd already gone to where we're trying to focus on which ones are going to get our attention. So again, I always go back to the ones that haven't been touched. My only thing that I would also like to do is, instead of doing piecemeal, and I know why we do that piecemeal, but we need to do something completely. Like this MLK one, that just to me needs to be touched, and not just touched, but we need to do something that reflects when you're looking at an equity lens, and something that says, okay, this is the standard that we're going to do. That's my only feedback, Mario.
And Pat, let me just kind of comment, because I think we've heard our superintendent say this. I think one of the reasons why this potential bond has the high schools is because I think we're all tired of having the high schools in previous bonds and not having completed them. We invest 20 million here, which sounds like an ungodly sum of money, and it is, but it doesn't ever complete them. And we need to start completing projects. And I think Pedro and Willie and Kedrick and Kamal's goal and the board's goal is, let's just get these high schools done so that we can kind of push them to the side and move on to the other projects. To another point that you make, Pat, on the lockers, yeah, the MLK lockers look bad, and I think, Christina, you made a comment on the chat box. Longfellow was touched. It's the one school on this list, I think, and Kamal, correct me if I'm wrong, that has had the most recent money invested in it. And yet when we did the tour of the lockers, it was horrible. It was just absolutely horrible. And this is something that we touched in 2010. So it goes to your point, Pat, of can't we just finish something so that we can kind of move on? And then the third comment I would make, and then I'm going to go back and throw it onto the floor. Christina, I really appreciate your comments. And for those of you that don't have special education, special needs children or grandchildren, it's sometimes they're the forgotten. We kind of overlook them. But I got touched the same way, because Christina and I believe Albert and I were the ones that toured Longfellow. And you see the entrance, and it's a gorgeous school, and it's on a gorgeous piece of property. It's a very, very gorgeous school, and you look at the latest edition with their cafeteria and whatnot, it looks great. And then you go to that area, and we kid you not, it is literally a dog leg stuck in a corner away from everything. And this is where those kids are sent to. And I can't begin to imagine what it's like to be a teacher or a teacher's aide, having to have the responsibility of controlling those children. But they're our children. They are our children, and we're a public school district, and we're empowered, and we have a duty to take care of those children. And it really, and I know this was never intentional by the school district, But if you didn't know any better, you would think that that was an intentional act to just put those kids as far away from everywhere else as you could. And that's why, Christine, I think you got emotional. I got touched by it as well, because you just, there's nothing else to say. You know, hopefully the video on Longfellow, because when we were there, they had just shot the video, I think the day or two before. And Kedrick, you were there with us, you can verify, but hopefully the video captured that area and you can see what it looks like. And if I recall correctly, Christina, if I'm wrong, correct me, I think it was an old science lab. So it's actually the teachers on an elevated platform. It may have a sink in there. I don't, it just looked dark.
Yeah.
And it looked nasty. And so, and that's Longfellow. I can't imagine some of these other
yeah,
schools.
it looked now, and then it was just in like probably, I mean, there were a lot of rundown rooms. I mean, I understand when it's aging infrastructure, but it's also just like the feel, the dog leg, like you said, how it was really like, how far away can they get? And then just the peeling paint, just everything about it. It was like, I can't imagine spending all day there. And that's like what the self-contained unit does, right? Like they don't necessarily, I understand it's, there are very high needs. I definitely get that. But, you know, if they're spending their entire day in this one space and they're not necessarily integrated and getting to go to the extracurriculars, they don't get to see the beautiful other rooms, you know? So we need to prioritize making those spaces better. That was very clear, very clear. So thank you. Thank you for reaffirming that.
Yeah. And leadership team, how does it make you feel to hear that and know that about the state of our classrooms?
So let me say a few things, folks. So one is, you know, unfortunately, nobody knows how bad the need is more than our staff. And as you know, part of your role is to really verify their need, right? Because it could be that, it's all perspective, right? And if you're coming from, because our classrooms just have so much need, it's just a variation in need. Of course, if you go to another district like North and Northeast, you're not going to see these type of classrooms. And so the need is very apparent. I think, the way, a couple of things I just want to remind you. So remember, our goal is to do every single building. That's really the goal. Now, it will take us over a good 10-year period to get everybody on track to do that. It's going to take, I believe, 2 large sets of bonds. But the goal is really to do all the buildings. And then, Christina and Denise, the reason Longfellow and Mario, the reason Longfellow is the way it is in those rooms, because it didn't get finished. Right. So one of the challenges that I saw from our history, and this is no blame on anybody, but it's just there was so much need, they wanted to spread the money around. So that's what happened in 2010. They spread the money around. And then when we had challenges in some of the buildings, money got cut, and then we didn't have enough money. So in 2016, we decided we were just going to do big projects. We were going to do big projects, and we focused on the high schools for the most part, which ate up pretty much all the money. I mean, it really ate up a lot. And so in 2010, the money got spread. So that's why one of the guiding principles that the trustees said was, we need to finish the projects. We need to go back. We need to, first of all, finish 2016. We need to finish, because otherwise we're going to keep having these issues where in the future you'll have 80% of the building done, but then you'll have these classrooms, and then you're going to walk in there and say, what the heck? Why are you doing this to these kids? Right? I mean, whoever those kids are. By the way, Longfellow, which is a school that's been exceeding its enrollment projections for the last couple of years. So because they have parts of the buildings that are not done, they're forced to use, some of these classrooms that are not in great condition because their enrollment is very strong. So again, what I would, again, just have you consider, for everybody is, again, part of the goal is what guiding principles should we use for projects on the first bond with the goal of getting every building done. That's really the ultimate goal. And then the other is, I want you to really have a good sense of the need, because I think our community is not aware. So part of where we need your help is that until you walk into these buildings, and as you said, Christine, until you realize, like, God, these kids are here every hour of the day, the whole day. It's not like for 30 minutes. And folks, I mean, you know, it isn't like, you know, we're not even showing you pictures of North Side and Northeast schools that show such a comparison. So again, folks, I just wanted to just say that, but again, you know, please continue to give feedback, and again, this is why we want you to see these buildings so you can see the need for yourself.
Others that you all might have some comments.
I had one more follow-up question. Now I know we're trying to minimize the bond allocation to, you know, we have a certain number in mind, staff has a certain number in mind, but what are the possibilities and the risks and rewards if we were to maybe be a little bit more expansive to include more problem areas? Does that start affecting our rating? Does that start affecting the interest rates in terms of finances? Why can't we go for a bigger piece of the pie?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Brandon. So let me put it this way. So what's interesting about Texas is that we can go for any amount we want to the public. And so, you know, we could go for the entire $2.5 billion all in one shot. The challenge is, and I know, you know, Gina was bringing this up earlier, is the questions, can we pass it? What our goal is to not raise taxes, is to keep our rates, you know, and I feel very confident that we can do that. And so basically the commitment we would make to the public is that we're gonna, you know, whatever they approve. So let's say we did go for the whole $2.5 billion, the whole enchilada, right? And they approved it. We would spend that money as the revenue's coming in. And because we've seen our tax base grow so much, and there's been so much investment even to date, we feel over through 2030, we could have the revenues to be able to have every project on track, to be maybe not finished, but to be on the track to be renovated. So that's what we're seeing, Brandon. And so we just, you know, right now, you know, we just looked at sort of, if we got to do 2 sets of bonds, do we take half of it this year and do another half, you know, sometime before 2030? That was sort of, and it's more of a strategy question of what will the voters trust us with and what will the voters pass? Again, with this commitment that we're not going to raise tax rates.
Okay, so sorry, just I guess the understanding is, what is there a threshold where we would have to start raising taxes if we ask for more than a certain amount of
yeah,
no. Okay.
No, there isn't, Brandon. I mean, right now, you know, we're doing our financial estimates, and we think that we can fulfill the commitment of not raising taxes. It's more of a question of what would the voters pass this, you know, this 1 year, and what number won't scare them, right? Because part of it is psychological. So, the biggest bond that's ever been passed, I think, has been in Northside, and that was, I think, just over $800 million.
Yeah.
So that's what it really is. So it really is psychological. Now, Austin passed a bond that I think that was over $1 billion. Dallas is going to go for a couple $1 billion this November. So we're not the biggest in the state, but it's, you know, what can we convince the public to support? And we've done polls, and we tested $1.2 billion, and as long as there was a plan and there was good information about the need of the buildings, 1.2 without raising taxes, you know, it seemed okay. People felt comfortable. Once you got beyond that number, they got a little bit nervous.
Okay. So it's more public perception than anything else. Thank you for the follow-up, Doctor.
Yep.
Amado,
go ahead.
Amado, I thought you were going to say something earlier. I don't know if you had a comment.
No, I was just going to say this, almost Reddick, the same thing that y'all are just saying. My thing is that I think I went to a couple of schools where I think there had already been some construction done to those schools. So like any of us, if we're remodeling our home and we're going to do an extension or something like that, sometimes, such as like Mr. Kamal had said, sometimes the foundation doesn't shift together. So you'll see some of the cracks on the newer stuff that's only been like 10 years or 20 years old. And to me, I think exactly what everybody's saying, we need to do something, and we need to fix the school and make it look completely new. And that way people will understand, you're asking me, but I see it in my neighborhood of something new, not something that, okay, I have this part new, this part is still old, this part is 50 years old, this is 30 years old, this is 10 years old. We need to decide, and I know that that, of course, will take a lot of our monies to do things like that, but you have to start considering that we need to make sure everything looks the same, because we want to leave it for the next 50 years. We want to leave it for the next 60 years. Highland Park, I think, was one of the schools I went to. The custodial staff, the staff that keeps the place looking the way it does, you have to commend them. I don't know where they do it, how they smoke screen it to make it look nice, you know, but they do. And they I think they take pride in that. But at the same time, in those situations, when you build something new to that, and you can see that that area sometimes looks a little bit worse than the one that's the older one, that makes me worried. You know, that makes me worry. Are we doing things correctly? Or are we just saying, okay, we're going to put this big Band-Aid here to make people see that, oh, we got the money, we got you something new, but it's not lasting. So we just have to be careful with that. I think people are always going to get scared when you ask for money. But if you can show, hey, my neighborhood got what Judson ISD or what Northside ISD, a brand new, you know, school with everything tech up to date and everything like that, people are going to say, hey, we're worth that. And yes, let me keep investing in that. And yes, let me go ahead, come back for some more money. But when we don't do that and we just put a little bit here, and don't finish anything, it doesn't look good on us. And so we need to just go ahead and try to finish something, even with this big bond. If you have these high schools that haven't been finished, you need to start doing the middle schools also. You need to start doing a lot of these elementary that you're combining elementary and junior high together. You have to kind of have whatever your plan is for the next 20 years on how education is going to be, you have to start planning that type of school now. And so that's just my opinion, comments.
Okay. Before I turn it over to Willie for his facility, any last comments? I mean, we're going to come back on new business. We'll have a little bit more time. I just want to be cognizant at 6:45. You know, I think we've all had the same experiences, and I think we're all committed to seeing this thing, you know, be completed. And I think we've got assurances from our superintendent and our board that this is what, you know, is the plan. And so unless someone wants to jump in with another final comment, then I'm going to turn it over to Willie and take it away. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Victor.
So my message to people, I'm talking to different people in the community and or just discussing this bond, I always tell them, you know, the air conditioning is going to happen across the board no matter what. Technology is going to be affected across the board no matter what. And then the secure vegetables are priority. Based on the conversation we just had, is it safe to assume, I saw Kedrick respond to a couple of the questions. Is it safe to add a fourth aspect, which would be the special ed classrooms? And is that going to be something that we can communicate to the community while as we're doing this? Because if it is, and I think it should be, how much after all of that's done, after technology is taken care of, special ed is taken care of, secure vegetables taken care of, and the air chillers are all addressed, how much is actually left over money-wise to really fix up these schools? Are we going to be able to truly hit half of them now?
So I think if I understand your question, Victoria, so one thing, folks, is keep in mind that the estimates you see per building, those are full renovations. So that's every room, special ed, every programming, and really there's enough. You know, really the goal isn't to decide what that building will be right now. It's really what buildings do we put on, what guidelines do we use, and the one thing that I really like about our current team right now is when you look at the projects we're doing right now, they're very forward thinking. Like in fact, I would have you guys go look at Fox Tech and the work that's been done there. I mean, it really is like a state of the art, you know, space. I mean, I can't wait for our kids to go see it. When you see the new Burbank and what that will look like, I mean, it's just state of the art. And so just know that's the way we're thinking. So really, Victoria, is really, when we pick a project, it's going to be the entire building, and we will look at enhancements for special ed. We'll look at enhancements for everything. The challenge of doing just spot classrooms is that you wind up, it winds up being inefficient in terms of renovation. So because in some of these buildings, you just need to tear them down, to be honest with you. Some of these classrooms, they just need to be completely gutted. And just to do surface, it's going to be like what Amado said. It's going to feel like, oh, I did a couple of classrooms in this building, maybe because there were special ed classrooms. It's not. It's going to feel like, like almost like an empty promise in that building. Because I think what the community is going to want is they want the whole building done. And so just know that's how we're thinking. It's literally getting the whole buildings done, with the exception, as you said, Mario, is to finish up some of the projects. So we're tired of seeing them on the list, which is mostly the high schools, which is the gyms and some of the athletic fields. They just didn't get done in the previous bonds. And that, by the way, won't be, it'll be a part of the bond, but it won't be like the majority of the bond. The majority of the bond is going to be doing buildings, like literally doing projects and pretty much cutting or redoing them completely.
Okay, Nellie, I think you may have a question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Willie.
There, okay. I didn't know, I had a hard time getting on. I didn't get the Zoom link, so somehow I got on. I don't, is there a number? The number that you said that we need is 1.2 billion, you said?
So Gina, Nellie, the total need is 2.5 billion. Our goal is to try to go for about half of it. And so because we see this, instead of going to the public with multiple, 3 or 4 different sets of bonds, we like to probably do 2. We think we do 2 big ones. And so half of 2.5 is 1.250. Mm-hmm.
But have you tried doing maybe a survey how receptive people are? I mean, I personally don't think in today's time 1.2 billion is doable. I mean, but I think.
Yeah, so we did a poll, just Nelly, we did a poll before we created the task force, and we tested, we tested, I think we tested $1.2 billion. And we did 800 million, we did 900 million, and we went up to $1.2 billion. And what we got favorable support as long as the need was verified and as long as there was a long-term plan. And again, with the commitment of not raising tax rates. So that's what we had. Now, keep in mind, that was before COVID. That was before, and so we're going to have to do another poll that probably will happen in the summer, probably like in late June, early July.
And let me just make one other comment, and then Willie, please take it away. I've been keeping up, I think all of us have. I mean, I personally get tired of hearing all the negativity on the COVID side, and we've had our share of other issues that have come up in the interim. But the one thing that to me are positive signs is that since we have reopened the economy, and again, from the negative side, you look at how our numbers are spiking, and I'm sure that's kind of injecting dread into our superintendent and leadership and the board, because it makes it harder to plan how the school's going to work in the fall. The 2 things that I'm taking heart in is you see retail sales up and you see car sales up. I think that was the biggest question I had, and probably hundreds of thousands of us, is once we go back, is there going to be money, and is there going to be money that's going to be spent? And right now, at least the preliminary answer seems to be that people are willing to spend money. That's a good sign, because then that means that people are going to be more receptive to spending money on things that really affect a community long-term, like a school bond. So just kind of look for those factors, and hopefully that will continue as we continue to reopen the economy. But I'm optimistic that this poll that will be taken later on in the summer will again be supportive of a bond, but we'll see. Willie, take it away.
All right, thank you. So in our first meeting, we went through and took you through the facility condition assessment to show you exactly how we came up with the list of schools. And as you indicated, that there are schools that have not been touched in 30 to 50 years. And so we took you through a color-coded chart that identified, red, yellow, blue, and green. And so what we want to do tonight, since we've had some of the tours, is to take you back through that, re-educate or reaffirm what information that we shared on that first meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Kamal. Between he and Kedrick, will share out this information and move through it pretty quickly so that we can leave some time for question and answers or clarification.
Okay, everyone. You've seen this slide before, and I'm going to concentrate on that so you understand how the consultants that we used conducted the assessment, and we'll go into some examples of this. So basically, when they looked at the buildings, they've determined our areas can fit in 4 categories. Areas that would need complete overhaul, that is marked in red, and those are the campuses or the areas of the schools that tend to be over 40 years old. And those are the ones we've seen. If you've been with me or Kedrick in one of the tours, this is the old wing. So this is those are the really old buildings that are from the 1950s and 60s or earlier, pre-World War II, pre-World War I. Those are the ones that need complete overhaul. So they got that red color. It's not just the age, but it tends to be the most prominent factor. There are some other issues that affected the color, which also affected how the consultant recommended the pricing of replacement or renovations. The second color is obviously the yellow, which is those areas that require either major renovations or partial renovations. And they tend to be in the 20 to 30-year-old campuses. Those are mostly additions that were put in either in the 90s, basically, or part of the 97 bond program. They were just partial additions, like we've all were concerned when we do partial work. Those were partial work for a campus. Then the blue are the ones that were added. Basically, they require minimal renovations. So some of them, most of them tend to be in the 10 to 15 years old, but they could be older, but they're in such a decent condition that they don't need as much money. Some of those are like the gyms or the early childhood facilities that were built in the early 2000s. And of course, the greens are the ones that were completed in 2010 and 16. So we feel those are the schools that were built with the current standards. They're still in great shape. So that's the criteria for conditional assessment and for pricing those projects. Going to the next slide. I don't know who's running the show here. That's good. So we broke out the schools by single member district. So some of you have seen ALA Euclid. Some of you know it as Austin Academy. So you will see there, there are 4 columns indicating if it received work in previous bond. Where you see upcoming with a cross mark, that means there's a significant amount of red for the campus. So what this chart is saying, about 65% of the campus is in 40-plus-year-old or need major overhaul. When we get through this list, we'll show you a couple of floor plans to show you how those break out. The rest of the campus is the second category. So even that part is already ready to receive some significant work that fell under major renovations. So you got 65, 35. Some of the other, like Bonham, received major funding in bond 2010. So the assessment team determined it's really in pretty good shape. So it's got the green, you'll see like a 10% blue. That probably had to do with maybe the gym has not received any work. It needs some window replacement. It needs minor issues, not as critical, but that's how the overall assessment. You go down the list, don't want to go through them one by one, but out of the red also you've seen Lamar. That's also about 65% red, 35% yellow, and Pershing and Travis also have a red in single member District 1. Going out to 2, single member District 2, out of these campuses, we've had a tour at Gates. That was Kedrick giving that tour. Martin Luther King, you all have seen it by video right now. And there was one of those campuses had a good significant amount of it is the really old part, and a smaller area estimated at about 35% that are somewhat a little better, but it's ready for additional work. And out of this, also Smith was visited. I guess we jumped to district number 3. All right, if you can hold just a second there. So we didn't see Tynan, Washington, or White, but of course, hopefully you'll have discussion if you'd like to see any more. We'll be happy to show you more. But you've seen Smith and Gates out of this list. And the videos are online, by the way, if you have a chance to go look at them. Going to District 3, single member District 3. Out of this, we looked at Highland Hills and Highland Park. No, I don't see it has Highlands, I'm sorry. Highland Hills and Shank. And still, we showed you a video, separate video of that. So if you recall at Highland Hills, that was about 50%, 50-50, really the old area that need a lot of work, and the other 50% that was partially from the 97 bond program, but it's already showing some age and requires some work. Not as much as the older part, but if you want to unify the whole thing, you need to do the whole thing at the same time. Next, single member District 4. Out of this, we've seen Gravener and Highland Park. Highland Park is the facility that predates World War I. For those few, we talked about 5 different levels, and we've seen in that, and I think those 2 campuses. So you will be, if you want to see one more, I'd like to show you Collins Garden. That's pretty old facility as well. So that would be an interesting, it needs a lot of work. Going to single member District 5. Let's see, out of those, we visited Carver Hall. It shows the majority of the campus is really the older version. It's 1948. There was only a very small wing addition and a gym that are in better shape. So that's why it got 20% yellow. And the rest of them, Rhodes was one of the schools we showed you a video on. And Storm, we visited Storm, and also has a major area that has not received renovations. So that's single member District 5. Going to 6, we did visit Neal, and that's one of the campuses that was about 50-50, an area that was not renovated and an area that was built a little over 20 years ago. And that was one of those areas that has structural issues that need to be put all together again. So it's a campus that has some critical needs. Out of the other colors, if you look at this list, it's basically campuses like Wilson at the bottom. Even though it was from the 97 bond program, since it was all built together, built with certain guidelines, it's not even showing as a yellow. The consultants figured that this is still have good age in it. It's in decent shape. It's blue, already showing some age, but it doesn't need, it's not as critical as some of the other areas. Going to District 7, of course, we saw out of those Longfellow, and we talked quite a bit about Longfellow, and Young Women Leadership Academy. Also, some of you know it as the Old Man Middle School, and they both are need major work. And young women really have not received, as you can see, any improvements, any recent improvements. So critical need. So with that, I want to show you, like, looking at where did those come from, is as the consultants look at these facilities, they started ranking the areas by needing complete overhaul. So you see the areas that designated as B1 and B2 are the second floor, and or D1 and D2 and C1 are all in red. So that represents about 65% of the overall, if you can look at the picture here. So 65% of the facility is really need overhaul. And the rest of it are the A1, A2, and E1 are need major renovations, not necessarily complete overhaul. So the allocated funds for those maybe at a lower number per square foot because they don't need complete overhaul. But of course, the combined number is what you've seen allocated in the master plan 2030 for that campus. So that's one example. And another example is if you go to the next slide, I think we have Carvajal. So for those of you who saw Carvajal, you know, the majority of the campus is from the 1948 era. It was, so basically with the consultant looking at everything, that's a one-level campus. Basically, they rated all that as needing complete overhaul or replacement. And for the areas that were built more recently, they ranked them as yellow. And that include the classroom addition, the library, and the gym. So that represented about 20% of the overall space. So hopefully that explains how those assessments were made. And
just real quick, Kamal, I think I'd like to add, Ryan, if you can go back to that Carvajal example. So I believe some questions have come up of what those percentages actually mean. And so this diagram is really hoping to show that it's really tied to the square footage of the building. And so to Kamal's point, so the red, what we typically do and what the consultants did was not necessarily design the replacement for the facility, but using historical data and projecting out to 2022, actually, what's our best estimation of what it would cost to completely overhaul a facility, right? So it's literally a square foot cost. And it's a gradation. It goes down from red to yellow to blue to green. And to Superintendent Martinez's point, the estimates that we put forward for the 2.5 billion for the entire district overhaul, more or less, is not to address a percentage of those color charts, but the 100%. So whatever percentage, so for ALA, the 65% red was estimated for 65% of that cost. And the remaining cost, the 35% yellow, was budgeted or estimated for the percentage of the building, 35% of what that 20 to 30-year-old major to minor renovation would cost. So each one of the estimated costs is for 100% complete renovation or overhaul of the entire campus. And this diagram is just showing where those areas were assessed. Another piece that we didn't really get into in this presentation that factored into it was this isn't the only assessment we did as far as facility condition, but we actually spent over a year with our academics team trying to figure out what is future ready learning, what does 21st century learning look like in SAISD. That was across the spectrum. That was in SPED, that was athletics, that was science, that was the core curriculum, because everyone touched on what does that world-class facility look like. So that's all also included in the cost estimate, what that 2.5 billion complete overhaul is.
Okay, Willie, Kedrick, and Kamal, thank you. Anything else in terms of this sort of master plan?
That's essentially it. And here just inserted this slide, just again to show in terms of timeline where we are and the August 17th is the recommendation if the committee does put forward a plan to move forward with the 2020 bond on a ballot. So this gives the timeline. Obviously, we're on June 16th, so potentially another opportunity to present to the Growth and Development Committee on the 8th of July, end of July, wrapping up a recommendation or a report for the board. And then August 12th, potentially another presentation to the Growth and Development, and then again, August 17th for a recommendation. And that's all we have regarding this. Is Mario frozen? That's
He's probably eating a burger right now.
okay. No, I think he may have dropped off. He looked frozen for a moment there, but I still see him here. Ryan, would you pull back up the agenda?
Yes, one second here.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Willie, I think you made comments, and now Ryan is all frozen.
Okay. I thought it was my internet, but we got Willie. I don't even think I caught maybe the last
Mario, you keep going in and out, so I'm not sure what you're trying to say.
Stop eating your burger, Mario.
Denise, be nice, be nice. It's dinner time, you know how that goes.
I think while Mario's trying to get back on, Willie and Kedrick and Ryan, do you guys have an outline for us on the future campus tours?
Could you say that again, Victoria?
Yeah.
Do you guys have, while he's trying to get back online, he said he got dropped and he's trying to get back in. While he's doing that, do you guys have an outline and or a list or ideas on our future campus tours?
Yes, we wanted to get some feedback from the committee in terms of those potential tours, but we do have a list, and I know as Kamal was recommending earlier, Collins Garden could be one of those. We did do the survey, and Kedrick has the results, and I think we sent those out in terms of those campuses that were desired. We do have a list that we can provide in terms of next tours. I think.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, there was a suggestion earlier about kind of giving us a matrix on how to prioritize these. So is there any way you guys could set up like a survey or something that would allow us to, one, I guess, answer matrix questions so we can kind of prioritize, and two, determine if we want to see more or if we've seen enough. They're not all the same. They're all different. I'd be an advocate right now, just speaking out of my gut, that I'd want to see more, especially if we're going to be required to prioritize them. There's also been a little bit of discussion about the dollar amount, the 1.2 versus the 2.4. It would be nice to survey everybody to see where they are on their perspectives. Nothing that's going to, derail us, but as just to get some ideas and opinions. Can you guys come up with something that will help us gather that information from everybody and prioritize from that end?
Yes, I believe that we can, or I know that we can. I think one of the things, again, that Superintendent Martinez indicated in the initial meeting, and also was alluded to that tonight, and that being around like the certain goals that the board had in terms of one was like finishing out the high schools. Every campus would have, you know, safety and security. There's also the technology, like every campus would receive technology. So there's some of those, I guess, core principles or goals for this particular program. And so I think we would be able to put that into some sort of matrix and list out all of the projects or the campuses and allow you and get some, I guess, get some initial feedback in terms of would that be adequate for you to be able to go in and rate.
This is Gina. I'd like to just clarify. I understand the desire to have a scoring matrix, but it seems as though we've already had a professional team do an assessment of the buildings, and the facilities team at SAISD has developed what I see as a set of priorities of which would be the first round for this bond and then which schools would go on the next bond. And so unless our committee is determining that we're going to go to a number less than 1.2, then I'm not sure why we as committee members would score and prioritize building needs. So I guess I'd like some feedback from staff if that's what you're looking for from us, or if we're simply making a recommendation to the board on whether or not to go forward with the bond at this level.
Well, I think it's a combination of those things. So, and you're absolutely right in terms of the staff, and as well as with consultants, you know, having spent, you know, the better part of a year and a half or a couple of years assessing facilities, identifying, you know, what 21st century or future ready learning looks like within SAISD. And so really pulling all those pieces together. And so I think the committee, having gone out to the campuses, looks at it from a community lens standpoint to be able to provide feedback in terms of, you know, what we've assessed from a facilities condition assessment. We looked at the, and this is, you know, we looked at the quote unquote science part of it, that, hey, here are the need, you know, here's the age of the facility, here's the age of the systems, here's the cost of replacing those, here's the cost of renovating those. And so that's how we ended up with a number. And based on our current, you know, financial state and the desire or the promise not to raise taxes, we, you know, it's thought that, you know, 1.2 to 1.3 is, I think, what we presented in the initial meeting is what we would look at in terms of a, you know, a potential first bond. But the total need is for the district is 2.5 billion, and with the goal of doing that over, you know, 2 or more bonds, but every school being on a path for complete renovation by the year 2030.
Well, I'd just like to say that I support that vision, and unless the next round of polling indicates that there's not a tolerance for a $1.2 billion bond, then I would like to follow the priorities established by the professional team rather than trying to tackle that scope as a committee. But I'm very interested to see what the results of the polling say, and I think we as a committee can really focus on strategy for how to shape the principles and priorities, and also how to build support for this.
Folks, I don't know if you all can hear me. My internet is really spotty.
We can now, Mario.
You know.
You're back now.
Yeah, let me just, before I get dropped again, because my internet is really spotty. Gina, I agree with you. I don't know if we have the time to do this, and really more importantly, whether we have a skill set. I mean, this list, the priorities were developed by people that have way more expertise than I have. And to me, the biggest thing is, do we want to keep seeing schools? And I think I'm hearing people, we are wanting to see all the remaining schools, because that's 26 more schools that we need to see and videotape, or do we want to see a portion more? And do we feel that that portion is going to be enough? That's what I need to hear from people.
Mario, I know that out of the elementary schools, we need to see as many as we can. I know we've seen some, but if we can see at least another 6 to 10 would be great. But I don't know how soon we really want to cut it off. Now, in years past, the school district normally is off for 2 weeks in July, but I don't know if that's still on the calendar or not. So that might throw us for a loop also.
Yeah, we're not closed for 2 weeks. The district is closed the last week of June, which goes into the 4th of July. You know, staff, other than that week, you know, we're available to do, you know, as many as are desired.
I personally would like to see on those charts that you just showed up, the ones that say that have a check mark where on the column that says upcoming. Those are the ones that I would like to maybe see a little bit more, because that means that you have something coming up for those.
Willie?
You hear me?
Oh, yeah, I do. Well, the upcoming ones are the ones that we're looking at as a part of a potential 2020.
Because I mean, I like to, when you say upcoming and they're there already, that I want to know what is that upcoming for those. Is it a whole gut out, a whole new section? Because that's going to help us as a committee sell it to our district to say, hey, look, these are upcoming. This is what we're planning to do for Carvajal. This is what we're planning to do for roads. And so since that's upcoming, I think if I get more of a, this is what your opinion is of those areas that are upcoming, I can easily tell, you know, the community.
Right. So the upcoming, again, so if you look at the chart, and all this information will be provided. So upcoming would mean any of those projects that we're saying would be potential for, you know, the next, as a part of the master plan. So if you look at it, those are primarily the schools that have, you know, 50% or more, or have a large portion of red in those, right? So Ryan, can you quickly switch to that chart just so that I can? And as you know, Kedrick and Kamal were explaining, as you look at that percentage, that's saying that, you know, let me get that up so I can actually talk to an example here. And Ryan, if you'll go to, yeah, just go to the campus, slide 13, I think it is. Yeah, so if you look at this and the portion that's red, so we're saying that that portion of Carvajal would be a complete regut. It'd be a gut and do all this. The portion that's in yellow would mean that it's major work, or you would need to do some renovation for all that's in yellow. But for Carvajal, we would do, the approach is 100% of that campus would be touched. So to some of the earlier comments, we wouldn't be coming back to this, you know, a second or a third time. We would do the complete work for the campus, 21st century learning, all the technology, SPED, all of the spaces would be programmed for, you know, 21st century future ready learning. If you were on some of the tours with Kedrick, I know we talked about the fact of, you know, creating spaces that you could, you know, very easily convert. So as opposed to using, you know, CMU for a wall, you would use, you know, high impact gypsum board. So that way, if you needed to convert the room, you know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you were able to do it at a lesser cost, as opposed to now having to take out, you know, structural walls and things like that. So that's the approach. But as it relates to, and Ryan, if you could go to any one of the other like slide 11. Yeah, let's do slide 11. So, yeah, so on here, so if you look at it, so Baskin, so it says, okay, you zoomed out on me there. Could you put it back in the presentation mode, Ryan? Oh, wow, I can't. Okay, so if you look at Baskin, so in the column that says upcoming, so we have Baskin, we have Huppert's, we have Longfellow, Madison, Nelson, and YWLA. Okay, thank you. And so again, the portions that are in red would mean that that's a complete, gut. The portion that's in yellow is a major renovation. So all of those would be a part of, a part of the current master plan. So 2020 to 2030 on a path to being completely redone. So
the only thing I'd like to add, is very, very critical to understand. So the master plan is to address the entire campus and to get every single square inch of the campus up to a district standard of world-class future-ready facilities. So it's not to say that, again, looking at this graph at Baskin, it's not to say that you need 2 bonds to complete Baskin, 50%, 50%, but either bond, you'll do 50% of red, which is the overhaul, and 50% of a minor or major renovation. And just because that 50% yellow is newer, we just estimate that you'd need less capital investment to get it to that district standard. So whether it's red, yellow, blue, or green, we have cost estimate built to get the entire campus up to district standard first-class facilities.
Okay, so Willie, I understand the upcoming are the 43 schools. Now, you say we're gonna need 2 bonds. So have you prioritized those 43 schools into the ones that are gonna be done the first bond, and then the others the second bond? Has that been prioritized?
So in terms of the 43, so there's the 43 that are on this list, plus you have the high schools that are in there in terms of the work that remains on the high schools. In terms of prioritizing, we've identified, potential schools that could be, as a part of a, first bond, second bond. We haven't concluded on any particular schools that are in there. Again, so part of the Blue Ribbon Task Force was to come together and, again, visit campuses and get, feedback in terms of the campuses and verify or get the community perspective on that.
We will prioritize the first set. Is that what you're saying? We, the committee, will prioritize them?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a combination of, okay, we've done the facilities condition assessment, so we know what the needs are based on the current conditions or the conditions at the time when the campuses were assessed. There's also the component of the guiding principles that the board has adopted or approved to say that these are the goals of this master plan. And then there's a component of the Blue Ribbon Task Force to then add that into the mix, if you will. And so based off of all of those ingredients, there are a list of schools that would be a part of a potential 2020 bond, and then there were future bonds after, that. And so the goal being that all schools are on a path to being completely redone by the year 2030. So as a part of a 2020 bond, there's some things that all schools would be touched with, and that's safety and security, that's technology, that's some refreshing of furnishings and things like that. So there are some components that every campus would be touched with. Will be a limited number of schools that would be a part of actual renovation work.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me, it's 7:27, folks, so let me see if we can wrap this up. But I want to clear up this one point, Rosalinda, that you brought up, and Willie, that you were answering. I just want to be clear, all right? This list of one of the original presentations, Willie, that you gave us that listed the 43 schools, are they not the schools that leadership has deemed to be a part of the hopeful 2020 bond? Or are you saying that we as a committee have to come in and then work on this list of 43 and prioritize which ones go into the bond? We need to be very clear about that.
Okay, so no, that's okay. So there are 43 projects. There are 43 plus the high schools to do there. That's 2.5 billion. So that's the entire master plan. That's the 2030 master plan. And the way that it's been broken up, if you will, is 1.25 for a 2020, and then there's subsequent bonds after that, whether that's be 2024, 2026, you know, really depending on the progress toward the initial bond in 2020.
So how many of these schools, and this is a very broad and probably a very idiotic question, but I got to throw it out. How many schools can we touch for $1.2 billion then?
There's, what was the number? It's 20, 25 or 30. Hold on for 1 second. Let me. Kedrick, Kamal, do you guys have that number right off the top?
I'm looking at it.
And has that been a part of a prior PowerPoint presentation that has been shown to the committee?
We've shown the entire group list of projects.
Right, but have we been shown a list of what we think we can touch? Because this really takes us all the way back an hour and a half ago, not quite, but to one of Amado's, questions is, what do we, if we're going to do something, we want to do it, we want to finish it. That has been the assurance that we've been given by leadership. So if the list of 43 plus the high schools is the master 2030 plan for 2.5 billion, how many of these schools can we touch in 2020 for 1.2 billion?
Hold on for 1 second. Let me
just real quick. So just so and making small, Willie, please correct me if I'm wrong, but our master plan is for all 90 campuses. The master plan is to bring every single campus in the district up to a district standard of world-class facility. So to the point of how many buildings can we touch for the 1.25 billion, it depends on the scope. And so as what we're hearing tonight, I believe, not to put words in everyone's mouth, the hope is we just finish the project as soon as possible, go to one campus, finish it 100% versus piecemeal. So with that being in mind, finishing the 2010 schools, finishing the bond 2016 schools, and as many of the 43 campuses that haven't been touched in 30 years, that number for 1.25 billion is 33 campuses. So that's right. Minus the bond 2016, minus Longfellow for bond 2010. So that would be 20, I'm not great with math, it's been a long day. 19 of the 43, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so then,
And do the committee members feel comfortable that they've seen that list of the 19 that would be recommended to be on this next bond?
well, and Gina, to your point, let me add on top of it. We visited 14 schools and we've seen 3 videotapes, so we've 17. How do we know we've seen the 17 out of the 19 that you all are recommending? I don't want, in other words, I want to be cognizant. You hear me say this all the time because we're all busy people. And these school tours, for those that have been able to do them, it's a 2-hour process. By the time you get to the school, By the time you take the tour, you ask the questions, and then you get back home or you get back to wherever you're going. It's a 2-hour process. So I give kudos to Amado, to Brandon, and I'm looking here to Albert. They've done 5 tours. They've done 5 of these tours, and that's asking a lot of everyone's time. I don't want to go see, for example, Tynan. If Tynan's not going to be one of those recommended schools on the 2020 bond. If that's going to be in the next bond, then the next Blue Ribbon Task Force Committee can go see Tynan. We don't need to see it. I just want to make sure we're seeing the schools that are going to be on the 2020 bond. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. And you're spot on. That's what we did as staff. We prioritized. Well, we did 2 pieces. Number one, we took the poll to see everyone's interest, and just by sheer, I guess, fortune, all the top priority schools were on that list of the 19 of the 43. So every campus that we've toured, every campus that we've videoed, time has not been wasted. It is now on a proposed list for Bond 2020.
Okay, if you all, as part of, I think Victoria was recommending a survey when I was getting spotty internet. I'm concerned about the timeline, but we need to do our job as a committee. If whatever survey you all are going to send out, you need to put that list of 19, all right, so that we know what else we haven't visited, so that we can get on it, because it's only Tuesday. We could go see some schools this Thursday. We could see a school this coming Saturday. Because if you look at the timeline, we only have, and I'm just kind of very quickly shifting to a calendar here, we have, in terms of full weeks, the week of next week, the 22nd, we have the week of the 29th, which takes us all the way to July the 4th, and then we have the week of July the 6th. We have realistically 3 more weeks before we probably need to wrap things up and start coming back together again. I just want to make sure, again, we're seeing the schools that the district is going to recommend. So if you would put that as part of your survey, that would be great.
Okay, we'll get that out to you no later than tomorrow morning.
Okay.
If not this evening.
All right, folks. So look for the survey. Ryan will send it out. Encourage those of you all that have not seen all the videos to go onto the Blue Ribbon Task Force Committee website and catch the videos. Again, I want to thank everyone, because I know that some of you all can't make the tours for a number of reasons, and you've explained. But the only thing I would ask is, if you sign up for a tour and your plans change, please let us know. Either email Kamal or Willie or Kedrick, myself, Victoria, so that we know that you aren't going to be there, and we can go ahead and start. Because some of the tours we've actually held off about 10 minutes, hoping that people are going to show up, and then they didn't show up at all. So just some housekeeping rules in that area. Take the survey. And Victoria, any other final comments?
I think we lost her. Oh no, she's there. Sorry, Victoria.
No, she's actually frozen, and we've been texting, and she's having trouble like I am. So, oh, there you are, Victoria. I see a head moving. All right. Well, I think we've been here long enough. I think we got our marching orders. I just want to thank everyone. Really, you all.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Mario and Victoria both.
Thank you, Mario.
All right. You all have a good evening. All right. Take the survey.
Yes.
Bye, you all. Stay safe.
Bye.